Hey, it's Clay. Welcome to another video. This is going to be my review of the Maltby TS1 iron heads. I've had them in the bag for a little bit over a year now and I've really enjoyed them. But I want to do a deeper dive, talk about all the specs, talk about my subjective opinions of them, and hopefully give you guys a little more information if you're looking to make a purchase decision. So let's go ahead and dive in. Alright, so the Maltby TS1 irons, I've owned them and had them in the bag for about a year now, and I've played quite a few rounds with them. I feel like I have a pretty good feel for how they're playing, and I just want to say at the start, the TLDR is that I love them. I think they're fantastic. To give you a little bit of background though, let's kind of dive into the specs and the ideas behind them and why maybe you should be considering them to get a little bit of a deeper understanding. Alright, so let's talk about tech. The TS1 irons kind of follow in the same line as the TaylorMade P790s, where they're a hollow head. So the the face is forged, the back is forged, but inside there actually is a hollowed out cavity, and that gets filled with some kind of polymer goo. And the end result really is that it has a pretty significant change on the ball flight characteristics that you're going to get as compared with maybe a traditionally forged cavity back or muscle back type design. The hollow head is going to, for the most part, broad stroke speaking, it's going to increase ball speed, so you're going to have a little bit more distance and launch. It's going to have a higher launch angle, and it's going to potentially lower your spin. Now, to kind of go along with that, a lot of times the loft gets changed and gets tweaked to kind of compensate with some of those changes, but those are kind of some of the broad stroke ideas that you have with a hollow headed design. I also believe that this helps give the designers a little bit more agency in terms of how they're going to distribute the weight throughout the club. So I think there's probably going to be a tungsten weight that gets placed in the club at a specific place, or the way that they're kind of moving weight around the perimeter of the club gets done in a certain way. And so they have a little bit greater flexibility with how they set the center of gravity and set the forgiveness profile of the head, maybe as opposed to a traditional forged blade design. I think the last variable that you need to consider is how it affects the aesthetics and the looks of the iron, because these irons look like blades. If you were just looking at these from a distance, they're going to look like blades. And if you're somebody that has maybe wanted some of the more super game improvement performance out of a more traditional, I'm going to call it shovel type iron, but you like the look of more of a player's iron, I think these strike a really nice middle ground where they offer some of those hotter ball speeds, maybe a little more forgiving, maybe a little better launch, but it also looks really, really stunning, more like a blade. And you can see from the look and the design of these irons that they've got kind of this muscle back look that I think is really, really sharp, and I think nails the what I'm looking for to give me all the performance that I would want without having to sacrifice some of the looks, so that I can look down and be inspired with confidence with the club. Now, I have never owned the TaylorMade P790 irons, but I did spend a pretty good chunk of time testing them. A friend of mine owned the P790s when I first bought these TS1s, and in my experience, the performance was very similar in terms of carry and ball flight and forgiveness characteristics. So if you have had any experience with those, you know, there are a lot of other irons that fit into that, like the Ping eye blades. I know Cobra's got a model. I believe Titleist has a model. Callaway has a model. All the major manufacturers these days have one of those hollow-headed, hot launching irons. Now, the obvious upside for me with the Maltbys is twofold. First of all, you get all the customization that you could ever want and desire from a do-it-yourself build. And if you are skilled in club making, or if you know someone that can build a set of clubs for you, you can pair these with literally any shaft, ferrule, grip, any combination of build that you would want. You have a lot more agency over that. And then second of all is the price. These are $50 a head, and you know, in comparison, the full build of a P790s or similar is going to be a lot more expensive. Now, in the DIY component world, in the Maltby world, these are as expensive as it gets. I don't think that Maltby has another iron in their arsenal that is as expensive as this. But even still, I would say that these represent a pretty tremendous value And just to give you some context with mine, I'll be transparent. I actually bought a 5 through gap wedge used on eBay, and I think I probably paid somewhere in the range of $170 for a set of used heads. And then I have some FST 115 shafts in here, which I got for I think $6 a shaft. And then I've got some Royal grips, which are $3 a grip. So you guys can do the math there. And I built them all myself. And so, you know, a pretty tremendous value proposition, which I think is pretty exciting for me to get that kind of elite level OEM, major OEM performance. You get the major benefit of looks, but you don't have to spend an arm and a leg for what they're charging for iron sets these days. So next I want to comment on Loft. The Loft gapping of this set is a little more modern. Now, Loft is kind of a complicated and kind of a hot topic, but I'm just going to kind of tell you where we're at on this. We have a 20-degree 3-iron. The pitching wedge is 45 degrees, and the gapping in between starts at 2.5 in the 3, 4, 5 irons. Then it goes to 3-degree gapping for the 6 and 7, 4-degree gapping between 7 and 8, and then the rest down is 4.5 degrees. So it kind of progressively goes from 2.5 to 3 to 4 to 4.5. Now, that kind of progressive gapping, I would say, would be opposed to a traditional gapping, which might be 4 degrees on the lower end and then maybe up to 3 degrees on the high end of this set. And I would say that this Loft gapping has worked fine for me. If I lived in a perfect world, I'd like more of a traditional 4-degree gapping. It works nicely for me. And then the 3-degree gapping kind of in that 3, 4, 5, 6 iron range also works really well too. But you know, I would say this Loft gapping is fine. 2.5 degrees between the 3-iron and 4-iron gets pretty tight for me, and that's why I've chosen to only go start at the 5-iron, 25-degree Loft 5-iron, and then I go to a 49.5-degree gap wedge. And for my swing speed, you know, I probably hit my 7-iron 160 yards. That has been a really nice transition point. You know, going from 25 degrees, I go to a 22-degree hybrid, and that just has been a really nice setup for me, and I would definitely recommend it. One other note I want to make about lofting is the Loft specifications that they have with the TS1s are actually unique to the TS1s in the Maltby catalog. The TS2s are a very similar design with they're just a little more of a forgiving super game improvement cavity back type design. I think if you wanted to do a combo set between the two, that was one of the things I was really considering. Maybe doing like a 4, 5, 6 in the TS2s to just help give me a lot of forgiveness and launch the ball a little bit better. And then maybe for the 7-iron on down to do the TS1s, I think you probably will need to do some bending. Otherwise, you might end up with a weird 5-degree gap in the middle there. I think that's a little bit unfortunate, a little bit maybe of a missed opportunity. I'm sure maybe there is a reason. I'm not aware of it. But I would really have preferred to see more maybe a standardization there of the Loft gapping, so you could combo the TS1 and the TS2 a little bit easier. Now, speaking of combo though, realize that the pitching wedge and the gap wedge are a traditionally forged design. They're not, the hollow head design quits at the 9-iron, so it already does have a little bit of that comboing built in. And I've been perfectly happy with, you know, I don't feel like my 5-iron is too hard to hit. And so for me, it's been totally fine. But just in a perfect world, I think maybe that's one thing that could be improved upon. The next thing that I want to mention is the sole design. This is one element of this club that I absolutely love, and I don't think I will ever be able to play an iron that doesn't have a sole design like this. And what I'm talking about is if I take the club and I look from the toe down, you know, how much curvature do you see there, and how sharp is this point from the face to the sole, that transition. And when I look at this, I see that it has a pretty good amount of curve, which I believe would be camber, and so that means it also does kind of present a pretty good amount of bounce, as opposed to a leading edge that is going to be much more squared off, like a more of a traditional bladed iron type design, like something you'd see on blades from the 80s and 90s, and even earlier. And in my experience, this kind of higher camber design, it really impacts with the way the club interacts with the turf. And so when I'm taking a swing, you know, if you think about the course conditions you play at, my courses here in the Midwest are typically a little bit softer. We get a pretty decent amount of rain sometimes, and the course doesn't typically turn into the really severe hard pan, thin type lies. So for my experience, having this little bit of camber means I've got a little bit extra forgiveness in terms of my low point and my strike. Depending on how I strike the ground, I've got a little bit extra forgiveness there to play with, which is something I really appreciate and I think is a really nice feature. The last specification I want to talk about is that this head does have a universal hosel, meaning it will accept both a 370 tip and a 3.5 tip, which is a really cool feature. So you can put this head on any shaft that you've got lying around and it should work just fine. So the next thing I want to touch on is the looks of this club. As I mentioned at the outset, I think one of the primary reasons why you would be drawn to something like this is because you want an iron that looks really stunning, looks more like a blade, and gives you that kind of confidence, which is something that has always been pretty important to me. And I think that this club knocks it out of the park on that regard. I think these are some of the best looking irons on the market today, whether it's Maltby or anyone else. They have very much a kind of blade, muscle back type look. The Maltby branding is actually pretty minimal, which I think is an awesome aesthetic. It's got this Maltby insignia here on the toe, which I actually think looks really cool. It says forged, it gives you the TS1 in kind of an understated font, and then this font here on the toe gives you the club number, and that's it. And I really love that cleaner, more minimalist type look. And the shaping of the irons as a whole, like I said, they look like blades, and they really are tremendous to look at. Some nice curvature of the flow lines across the club, not a lot of boxiness or squareness, and just overall a really sharp looking club. And in my opinion, as somebody that loves looking down on old blades but hates to play them, these really do a good job of scratching that itch for me of being nice to look at while also offering the performance benefits that you need. So then lastly, I want to touch on performance. These clubs have performed excellently for me. I would say that because they've got the hollow head, it did impact my ball speed and my carry distance. It gave me a little bit of extra distance, which is not something that I would say that is needed. I think with a set of irons, you really need to make sure that you can carry at a consistent number, whatever that number is. But I have not had any problems with consistency with these clubs, and I think that the extra ball speed has been really nice, especially on off-centered strikes. If I hit it a little bit on the toe or a little bit on the heel, maybe catch it a little fat, a little thin, these irons still perform really well, and I think that is a primary place where I see it. On off-centered strikes, I get a little bit extra help from that hotter ball speed. One thing that I don't have a lot of scientific data on is the idea of a ball jumping or popping. I've read some articles or some forum posts, or I've watched some videos that talk about some of these modern hotter faced irons, especially in comparison with a traditional forged blade. And I think there might be some evidence that would suggest that the traditional blade is going to be pretty stable and consistent in terms of distance gapping front to back. That if you consistently strike the center of the face with a blade, it's going to consistently travel and spin a consistent amount. With these irons, I felt like actually my green and regulation percentage has gone up, so I feel like I am getting a lot of consistency. Every once in a while, I would say maybe like once or twice every 3 months or so, I have a shot where it seems to really catch and sail almost like a flyer. And I have suspected maybe that has something to do with it just catches a certain part of the face and it's pretty hot. But I would say that probably could be a number of other factors too. With my traditional cavity back irons, I've done that from time to time as well. So maybe I'm just kind of looking for the evidence where it's not. But in my experience, that has not been a consistent problem that has made these irons unplayable. I think my carry distances have been actually better because it's more likely that I will miss hit and I will need the extra ball speed and forgiveness that I'm getting from the hollow head design to kind of help me keep up with a good strike. So for me, it's been overall a net positive to have the design and performance the way it has been. And then lastly, to kind of bring it all home, just to give you my very final review, I have been extremely impressed with these irons. I've bought a number of different Maltby clubs in the past, and I would say in terms of performance compared to major OEM brands, these things are they're neck and neck, they're right up there. And in terms of looks and aesthetics, I think these are some of the best looking irons that Maltby or anybody else has made. I am extremely impressed with these irons. I'm going to give them a 9 out of 10. I think they're truly excellent, and I have been really impressed with them, and I'm happy to have them in the bag. So if you're interested, I would say with confidence, they're a great club, and hope you guys enjoyed this review and this video. See you again soon. Thanks, bye.